The night we chose desire. The night we chose desire began with rain. Not the violent kind that batters rooftops and rattles windows, but the soft, uncertain kind that falls like hesitation. It glazed the pavement outside my apartment and blurred the city lights into trembling halos. The world looked indistinct, as though it couldn't quite commit to its own shape. I remember standing by the window, watching the droplets race each other down the glass. I had been waiting for him, though I told myself I wasn't. Waiting implies hope, and hope is a dangerous thing when it attaches itself to the wrong person. My phone lay silent on the kitchen counter. I had tried to bury the achy all evening, washed the dishes twice, rearranged the books on my shelves, even folded laundry that didn't need folding. But nothing could distract me from the quiet hum inside my chest, the one that whispered his name like a prayer I no longer believed in. Daniel. He was supposed to be home with her. The thought came like a blade sliding slowly between ribs. Her. The woman with the soft laugh and the gentle patience. The woman who had known him first. The woman who wore the ring he once showed me in a photograph, his voice full of something that sounded like pride. "She's my anchor," he had said then. I wondered what I was. A storm, perhaps, or a mistake. The knock at the door startled me so violently that my breath caught halfway up my throat. For a moment I didn't move. I just stared at the wood as though it might dissolve if I looked at it long enough. Another knock. Softer this time. I crossed the room slowly, each step heavy, deliberate. My hand hovered over the handle, trembling not from fear, but from knowing. I already knew what would happen if I opened it. I knew the line we would cross, the point of no return. I opened it anyway. He stood there drenched in rain, dark hair plastered to his forehead, jacket soaked through. His eyes found mine instantly, and in them I saw the same storm I felt inside myself. Restless, reckless, pleading. "I shouldn't be here," he said, though he made no move to leave. "You came anyway." His jaw tightened. He looked exhausted. Not physically, something deeper. A man worn thin by his own heart. "Can I come in?" There it was. The question that held the weight of 1,000 consequences. I stepped aside. The door clicked shut behind him. And with that small sound, something in my life shifted irrevocably. The air between us felt charged, almost electric. The kind of silence that hums louder than words. He peeled off his jacket, water dripping onto the hardwood floor. I grabbed a towel from the bathroom and handed it to him without speaking. Our fingers brushed. The contact was brief, accidental, and yet it felt like a confession. "You're shaking," he murmured. "So are you?" We stood there, close but not touching, as if the space between our bodies was the only thing keeping us from falling. I could smell the rain on him, mixed with the faint trace of cologne I had come to associate with stolen afternoons and unfinished sentences. "Emily," he said quietly. My name in his voice always sounded fragile, as though he feared it might break. "You should go home," I whispered, even as every part of me prayed he wouldn't. He laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. I was home. The words settled heavily in the room. "And?" I asked. He ran a hand through his wet hair, pacing a few steps before stopping in front of me again. "And I sat there across from her at dinner. And she was talking about repainting the guest room. And I couldn't hear a word she was saying, because all I could think about was you." The confession was a stone dropped into still water. "Don't," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. "I tried, Emily. I swear to God, I tried to ignore it. I told myself it would fade, that it was just something new, something exciting. But it's not fading." My chest tightened painfully. I had told myself the same lies, that this was temporary, that longing would eventually tire of itself, that desire could be reasoned with. It couldn't. "This isn't fair," I whispered to her. His eyes closed briefly. Guilt flickered across his face like a passing shadow. "I know." The rain outside grew steadier, tapping against the windows like impatient fingers. "You love her," I said. He opened his eyes again, and what I saw there made my breath hitch. "I do." The words hurt more than I expected. "But I love you too." Silence. I had imagined hearing that sentence 100 times before. In my fantasies it felt triumphant, like winning a war. In reality, it felt like watching a house burn down. "Daniel," I said, my voice breaking, "that's not how love works." "Maybe it is," he replied. "Maybe we just pretend it doesn't because it's easier." I turned away from him, wrapping my arms around myself, as though I could contain the shaking inside me. I wanted to be noble. I wanted to be the kind of woman who stepped aside gracefully, who told him to fix his marriage, and meant it. But I was so tired of being good. "I hate this," I admitted. "So do I." "Then why are you here?" He crossed the room in 2 strides. His hand found my arm, warm and steady. I could feel his pulse against my skin, fast and desperate. "Because every night I don't see you feels like I'm suffocating." My heart pounded painfully in response. "This is wrong," I breathed. "I know." "We're going to ruin everything." He didn't argue. Instead, he lifted his hand slowly, hesitantly, and cupped my face. The gesture was unbearably tender. His thumb brushed the corner of my mouth, and I felt my resolve fracture like thin ice. "You deserve someone who chooses you," I said, though my voice sounded distant, as if it belonged to someone else. "And you deserve someone who can't stay away," he answered. The truth hung between us, heavy and undeniable. We stood there for what felt like hours, suspended in that fragile space between restraint and surrender. I thought about her again. About the ring, the dinner table, the future they had built together brick by careful brick. And I thought about the way his hands trembled against my skin. "You should leave," I whispered one last time. He leaned his forehead against mine. His breath was warm, uneven. "Tell me to go," he said softly. "And I will." I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. The rain kept falling. His lips hovered a breath away from mine. And in that suspended second, I understood something terrifying. We were not victims of circumstance. We were not helpless against fate. We were choosing this. Choosing the heat over the ruin. Choosing the moment over the aftermath. Choosing desire over decency. I closed my eyes. And when his mouth finally touched mine, it felt less like a kiss and more like the sound of something breaking. Not shattering. Nothing so dramatic. It was quieter than that. The soft, irreversible crack of a foundation giving way beneath a house that had once stood steady. I felt it in my chest first, then in my throat, then in the trembling of my hands as they rose, almost against my will, to rest against his damp shirt. For a heartbeat, we froze, as if we both expected the universe to intervene. A phone to ring. Thunder to split the sky. A voice from somewhere wiser than us telling us to stop. But the world remained indifferent. The rain kept falling. The city lights kept flickering beyond the glass. And Daniel's lips pressed more firmly against mine, erasing whatever fragile space remained between hesitation and surrender. His hands moved carefully, as though I were made of something breakable. One slid to the small of my back, drawing me closer. The other cradled the side of my face with an intimacy that felt almost sacred. I tasted rain and regret, and something else. Something warm and electric that ignited beneath my skin. When we finally pulled apart, it wasn't because we wanted to. It was because breathing had become necessary again. His forehead rested against mine, both of us unsteady. "We can still stop," I whispered, though my hands had tightened in the fabric of his shirt. "Do you want to?" he asked. The question lodged itself deep inside me. Did I want to? I thought of her again. The woman who trusted him. The woman who believed tonight was ordinary. Perhaps she was curled up on their couch with a book, unaware that the man she loved was standing in another woman's apartment, unraveling. Guilt burned hot in my stomach. "Yes," I said. It was a lie. Daniel studied my face, searching for something. Permission, maybe, or absolution. When he didn't find either, he kissed me again. Slower this time. Deeper. As though he were memorizing the shape of my mouth. This time, I didn't pretend to resist. My hands slid up around his neck, fingers threading into his damp hair. The sensation grounded me, tethered me to the present moment so completely that everything else blurred at the edges. "Emily," he murmured against my lips, my name breaking into pieces between breaths. The way he said it made me feel seen in a way I had never quite felt before. Not admired, not desired. Seen, as if he understood the quiet loneliness I carried even before he ever stepped into my life. He lifted me slightly, guiding me backward until my shoulders met the wall. The contact sent a shiver through me. Not from fear, but from the finality of it. We were no longer standing in uncertainty. We were falling. My apartment felt smaller suddenly, the air thicker. Every sound amplified. The brush of fabric, the uneven rhythm of our breathing, the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. His hands explored cautiously at first, as if asking silent questions. I answered each one without words. There was a moment, a brief, piercing moment, when I saw us from the outside. Two silhouettes tangled in dim light. Two people convincing themselves that this was love and not just hunger dressed in poetry. Tell me this isn't just because it's forbidden, I said suddenly, pulling back enough to search his eyes. He looked startled, almost wounded. You think that's all this is? I don't know what it is, I admitted. I don't know if you'd want me this much if there weren't consequences. He exhaled shakily. Emily, I've wanted you since the first afternoon we spent arguing about music in that stupid cafe. Despite everything, a fragile smile tugged at my lips. You said my taste was tragic. It is, he said softly, brushing his thumb across my cheek. But I loved the way you defended it. Loved. The word felt dangerous. He kissed me again, and this time there was urgency in it. Not frantic, but determined. Like a man who had already lost something and refused to lose this too. My hands moved to the buttons of his shirt. I hesitated only a fraction of a second before undoing the first one. Then the next. Each small action felt monumental. This is real, he said quietly, as though reading the doubt still flickering in my expression. What I feel for you, it's real. But is it enough? I asked. He didn't answer immediately. His silence scared me more than any lie could have. Finally, he said, I don't know. The honesty hurt. We stood there suspended in that truth. This wasn't a fairy tale. There were no grand promises of leaving her tomorrow. No declarations of starting over. Just two flawed people acknowledging the uncertainty and choosing each other anyway. That was the cruelty of it. He lifted me into his arms then, carrying me toward the bedroom with a tenderness that felt almost reverent. I wrapped my legs around his waist, my heart pounding so loudly. I wondered if he could hear it. The bedroom was dim, lit only by the faint spill of streetlight through the curtains. Shadows traced the walls like silent witnesses. He laid me down gently, as if placing something precious on an altar. For a moment he simply looked at me. There was vulnerability in his gaze that made my throat tighten. Not conquest. Not triumph. Just a man standing at the edge of a decision he could never undo. Say something, I whispered. I'm terrified, he confessed. Of what? Of hurting everyone. You already are, I said softly. The truth didn't drive him away. Instead, he leaned down and pressed his forehead to mine again. A gesture so achingly familiar, now it felt like a ritual. I don't want to regret this, he murmured. You will, I said, His lips curved into a sad smile. Probably. The rain outside intensified, drumming against the windows with a rhythm that felt almost urgent, as if the night itself were urging us forward. He kissed me slowly, tracing a path from my mouth to my jaw, my neck. Each touch ignited something inside me that drowned out reason. I knew this would change everything. I knew tomorrow would be heavier, that the air between us would carry new weight, that guilt would bloom in quiet moments, like a bruise beneath the skin. But in that room, under that fragile wash of streetlight and rain, desire felt louder than consequence. We moved together hesitantly at first, like dancers learning unfamiliar steps. Then with growing certainty, my fingers traced the lines of his back, as if committing them to memory. His breath trembled against my collarbone. There were no grand declarations, no dramatic confessions. Only whispers. Only the soft repetition of each other's names. And beneath it all, the unspoken understanding that this night would divide our lives into before and after. When we finally lay still, tangled in rumpled sheets and fading warmth, the rain had softened again. Daniel's arm was draped over my waist, his breathing slowly evening out. I stared at the ceiling, unable to close my eyes. The euphoria was already fading, replaced by something heavier. Emily, he murmured sleepily. Yes. He tightened his hold slightly. Don't disappear on me. Will my chest tighten painfully? I won't, I said. But even as I spoke the promise, I felt the first fracture of doubt spread quietly through my heart. He fell asleep not long after that, his breathing deep and steady against my shoulder, as if the storm inside him had finally found rest. I lay awake beneath, the thin wash of streetlight filtering through the curtains, staring at the ceiling as shadows shifted slowly across it. I had imagined this moment differently. I thought there would be triumph, a sense of arrival. Instead, there was only a hollow stillness blooming inside my chest, expanding with every quiet second that passed. His arm around my waist felt warm, protective even, but it also felt heavy, like a chain. Carefully, I turned my head to look at him. In sleep, Daniel looked younger, softer. The lines of worry that usually carved faint grooves beside his eyes had smoothed out. His lips were slightly parted, his brow relaxed. He looked like a man at peace. And I hated that I might be the reason that peace would not last. My gaze drifted to the nightstand, where his phone lay face down. I wondered if she had called. If she had sent a message asking when he would be home. If she had felt the empty space beside her in bed and dismissed it as something harmless. The thought pressed down on me until breathing felt deliberate. Gently, I slid out from beneath his arm. He stirred, murmuring something incoherent, but didn't wake. I wrapped myself in a sheet and padded barefoot toward the window. The rain had thinned to a mist. The city looked washed out, fragile. Streetlights flickered in puddles along the sidewalk. Somewhere in the distance, a car passed, tires hissing against wet asphalt. I pressed my palm against the cool glass. What had I done? The question wasn't dramatic. It wasn't even loud. It was small and steady, like a pulse. What had I done? A memory surfaced without warning. Our first conversation in that cafe. He had been seated across from me at a long communal table. Both of us reaching for the same sugar packet at the same time. Our fingers brushed, and we laughed. "You can have it," he had said. "I don't even take sugar," I replied. "Then why were you reaching for it?" "Because you were." He smiled at that, a slow, amused smile that felt like an invitation. Back then, it had felt innocent. A spark between strangers. I hadn't known he was married until weeks later. By then, the spark had already grown roots. I closed my eyes now, resting my forehead against the window. This wasn't some spontaneous collapse of morality. It had been building for months. In lingering glances. In conversations that stretched too long. In the way he remembered small details about me that no one else seemed to notice. "You always hum when you're nervous?" he had said once. I hadn't even realized I did. A floorboard creaked behind me. I turned to see him sitting up in bed, hair rumpled, eyes heavy with sleep. He looked at me for a long moment before speaking. "You're far away," he said quietly. "I'm right here?" His gaze softened. "No, you're not." He swung his legs over the side of the bed and stood, pulling on his jeans slowly, as though bracing himself for something. I watched him dress in silence, each movement deliberate. "Are you leaving?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "I have to." Of course he did. The words hung between us, weighted with implication. He stepped closer, reaching for my hand. His fingers were warm, grounding. "Talk to me," he urged. "Don't shut down." I swallowed. "What happens now?" He hesitated. The hesitation said everything. "I don't know," he admitted. "I just know that I don't regret being here." "I do," I whispered, though the H in my voice betrayed me. His jaw tightened. "Don't say that." "It's the truth." He cupped my face again, forcing me to meet his eyes. "If you regret it, then I'm the villain in your story. Aren't you?" The question slipped out before I could soften it. Something flickered across his expression. Pain, perhaps. Or recognition. "Maybe," he said quietly. "But you're not innocent in it either." "I know." We stood there in that fragile gray space, between tenderness and accusation. "Do you love her?" I asked suddenly. He exhaled slowly, as if the question had been waiting for him. "Yes." The word felt like a door closing. "And you love me?" I pressed. "Yes." "How do you carry both without breaking?" He looked at me then in a way that made my chest ache. "I think I am breaking." A silence wrapped around us. He leaned down and kissed my forehead. Not my lips this time. The gesture felt almost mournful. "I need time," he said. "For what?" "To figure out what I'm capable of destroying." The honesty left me breathless. He pulled on his jacket, still damp from the night before. I watched him as though committing every detail to memory. The slope of his shoulders, the way he avoided looking directly at the bed, at us. "Will you tell her?" I asked. His hand froze on the doorknob. "I don't know." The uncertainty felt like a blade sliding slowly across skin. "Emily," he said, turning back to me, "last night wasn't a mistake." Then what was it? A choice. The word echoed painfully. He opened the door. Cold morning air slipped inside, brushing against my bare arms. "Don't disappear," he said again. I forced a small, brittle smile. "Go home, Daniel." He lingered a second longer, as if waiting for me to call him back. I didn't. The door closed. The sound was soft, final. I stood there long after his footsteps faded down the hallway. The apartment felt cavernous now, stripped of warmth. The bed behind me was rumpled, sheets tangled in quiet accusation. I walked back to it slowly, sitting on the edge. My body still remembered him. Every touch, every breath. But memory had already begun to sour into something heavier. On the nightstand, my phone lit up. A message. My heart stumbled painfully before I even picked it up. But it wasn't from him. It was from an unknown number. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, pretending that whatever waited on the other side of that notification didn't exist. Instead, I opened it. There was only one sentence. "I think we need to talk." No name, no context. But somehow, deep in my bones, I knew exactly who had sent it. My hands began to tremble so violently that I had to sit down. The message glowed on the screen, stark and merciless against the morning light, creeping through the curtains. "I think we need to talk." No anger. No accusation. Just quiet certainty. She knew. Or at least she suspected. My mind raced through possibilities. Had she gone through his phone? Had she noticed the way his voice shifted when my name came up? Had guilt carved something visible into his face that she could finally read? I stared at the number, my thumb hovering uselessly above the screen. I could ignore it, pretend I never saw it, let Daniel handle the consequences of what we had done. But that felt cowardly, and I had already been coward enough. I typed back before I could lose my nerve. "Okay." The response came almost immediately. "Tonight, 7 p.m. There's a cafe on Maple Street." Of course there was. Neutral ground. Public. Controlled. My chest felt tight as I set the phone down. The room seemed smaller now. The air heavier. The bed behind me still carried the imprint of Daniel's body. The memory of his warmth clung to my skin, like something I couldn't wash off. I stood abruptly and stripped the sheets from the mattress. The fabric twisted in my hands, as though resisting me. I shoved it into the laundry basket with more force than necessary. This wasn't about cleaning. It was about erasing evidence. But some things don't wash out. The hours until evening crawled by in a haze. I showered twice, scrubbing at my skin until it reddened. I stood beneath the hot water and replayed every moment of the night before, searching for some sign that would justify it. There was none. By the time I stepped into the cafe at 7, my heart felt like it was beating in my throat. She was already there. I recognized her immediately from photographs, though seeing her in person felt different. Smaller somehow. Not physically, but in presence. She wore a soft gray sweater, her dark hair pulled back loosely. There were faint shadows beneath her eyes. She looked tired. She looked human. And that made everything worse. Her gaze lifted when the bell above the door chimed. It found me without hesitation. There was no dramatic flare of anger in her expression. No theatrical heartbreak. Just a steady, assessing calm. I walked toward her on unsteady legs. "Emily," she said quietly. Hearing my name in her voice felt like standing on a fault line. "Hi." The word sounded inadequate. I sat down across from her. The table between us felt like a thin, fragile barrier. I noticed she had ordered tea. It had gone untouched. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The cafe hummed around us, cups clinking, low conversations blending into white noise. The world carried on, oblivious to the quiet destruction unfolding at our small corner table. "I won't drag this out," she said finally. Her voice was soft, controlled. "I know about you." The words were not sharp. They were heavy. I swallowed. "He told you?" And she shook her head slowly. "Not exactly." A bitter smile touched her lips. "I found the messages." Of course she did. "How long?" she asked. The question landed gently, but it carried enormous weight. "Months," I admitted. She closed her eyes briefly, as if absorbing a physical blow. "Were you going to tell me?" she asked. The honesty in her tone broke something inside me. "I don't know," I whispered. She let out a slow breath. "That's what I thought." Silence stretched between us. "I'm not here to scream at you," she continued. "I'm not even sure I have the energy for that." Her composure felt more devastating than fury ever could have been. "Why?" she asked softly. There it was. The question that had no clean answer. "I didn't mean for it to happen." I began weakly. She gave me a look that wasn't cruel. Just tired. "It doesn't happen by accident." She was right. "I love him," I said. The words felt smaller out loud than they had in my head. She nodded slowly. "I figured. And he?" "Loves you too," she finished. Hearing it from her lips made it feel uglier. A tear slid down her cheek, though her expression barely shifted. She wiped it away, almost absently. "Do you know what the worst part is?" she asked. I couldn't speak. "It's not the betrayal. It's not even the sex." Her voice wavered slightly on the last word. "It's that he looked at me across the dinner table last night like he was somewhere else." My stomach twisted violently. "He was with you," she said. It wasn't an accusation. It was a fact. "I never wanted to hurt you." I whispered, though the statement sounded hollow even to me. She studied me carefully. You don't seem cruel. I'm not. No. She agreed softly. You're just in love. The simplicity of it cut deep. And what are you going to do? She asked. The question startled me. Me. Yes. Because this isn't only about him. You had a choice too. The truth pressed down on me. I don't know, I said honestly. She looked down at her untouched tea. I've spent 12 years building a life with him, she said quietly. 12 years of small things. Shared groceries. Sunday mornings. Grief. Laughter. You don't replace that overnight. I'm not trying to replace you, I said. She gave me a sad smile. But you already have. The words settled like ash. I'm not going to beg him to stay, she continued. If he chooses you, that's his decision. Her composure was unraveling now, just slightly. Her fingers tightened around the cup. But I need to know, she said, her voice trembling for the first time. Or are you willing to destroy everything for him? The cafe seemed to fade away. Was I? I thought of the night before, of the way he had looked at me in the dim light, of the way my heart had surged when he said he loved me. And I thought of this woman sitting across from me, holding herself together with quiet dignity. I don't want to destroy anything, I said. That's not what I asked. Her eyes locked onto mine, searching. Are you willing to choose him? She whispered. Knowing what it costs. My throat tightened painfully. Because now the cost had a face. It had her tired eyes, her trembling hands, her 12 years. The silence stretched so long it began to ache. Finally, I said the only honest thing I had left. I don't know. She nodded once, as if she had expected that answer all along. Neither does he, she said quietly, and somehow, that uncertainty felt more tragic than any certainty could have been. We sat there for a moment longer, suspended in the fragile space between two lives unraveling. I wanted to say something meaningful. Something that would ease the weight pressing down on her shoulders. But there are no comforting words for betrayal. She stood first. I won't contact you again, she said softly. Whatever happens next, happens between you and him. There was no threat in her voice. No promise of revenge. Just exhaustion. I'm sorry, I whispered, the words thin and insufficient. She looked at me for a long moment, and in her eyes I saw something unexpected. Not hatred. Grief. I believe you are, she said. That's what makes it worse. Then she walked away. The bell above the cafe door chimed gently as it closed behind her. A small, ordinary sound that marked the end of something enormous. I sat there long after she left, staring at the untouched tea she hadn't finished. My reflection in the window looked unfamiliar. Like someone who had stepped outside her own body and couldn't quite find her way back. The night air felt colder when I stepped outside. The sky was clear now, washed clean of rain. The world looked deceptively calm. My phone vibrated in my hand before I even realized I was holding it. Daniel. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I let it ring once. Twice. Then I answered. She talked to you? He said immediately. It wasn't a question. Yes. A pause. I could hear the strain in his breathing, the tightness in his voice. What did she say? That she knows, I replied. About us. About everything. He exhaled sharply, like someone bracing for impact. I told her. The confession landed between us like shattered glass. When? After I left you, he said quietly. I couldn't sit across from her again and pretend. A strange mixture of admiration and dread curled inside me. And? I asked. She didn't scream. She didn't throw anything. His voice cracked slightly. She just looked at me, like I was someone she didn't recognize. I closed my eyes. She asked if I loved you. He continued. And? I said yes. The word felt heavier this time. Silence stretched between us. Not empty but loaded with everything that had changed. She asked me if I was leaving, he said. My heart pounded painfully. What did you say? Another pause. I told her I didn't know. There it was again. That fragile, devastating uncertainty. Emily, he whispered. I don't know who I am right now. Oh, his vulnerability might have undone me once. But something inside me had shifted in that cafe. Something fragile had hardened into clarity. You're someone who wants both, I said softly. That's not fair. No, I agreed. It's not. He was quiet. She asked me the same thing she asked you. I continued. If I'm willing to destroy everything for you. My voice trembled, but I forced myself to go on. I told her I don't know. He let out a shaky breath. So we're just floating in this. The image felt painfully accurate. Two people suspended between past and future, refusing to land. I saw her, Daniel, I said. Not as your wife. Not as some abstract obstacle. I saw her. He didn't respond. She's not dramatic, I continued. She's not cruel. She's just hurt. I know, he whispered. And I realized something. The words caught in my throat, thick and heavy. I don't want to be the reason someone looks at the person they love and sees a stranger. The silence on the other end deepened. What are you saying? He asked. His voice barely audible. I stopped walking and stared up at the night sky. The stars looked distant and indifferent. I'm saying that desire isn't enough. My chest ached as I spoke the words. I love you. I continued, tears finally spilling over. But love that begins in someone else's ruin doesn't grow clean. It always carries the fracture. Emily. No. I said gently. Listen to me. My voice shook, but it didn't break. If you leave her, it has to be because your marriage is over. Not because I'm waiting at the other side of the door. He inhaled sharply. And if you stay, I whispered, then you stay fully. not half here with me. The weight of what I was doing pressed down on my lungs. "You're asking me to choose," he said. "Les. And if I don't choose you?" The question sliced through me. I swallowed hard. "Then I'll survive." The lie tasted bitter. On the other end of the line, I heard him struggle to breathe evenly. "I don't want to lose you," he said. "You already did," I whispered. The truth hung between us. Because the version of us that existed in secrecy, in stolen moments and rain, soaked nights, that version couldn't survive daylight. "I can't do this halfway anymore," I said. "I can't be your escape." He was crying now. I could hear it in the uneven rhythm of his breath. "I thought you were the answer," he said. Maybe I was just the question. Though we stayed on the phone in silence for a long time. Neither of us willing to end it. Neither brave enough to rewind time. Finally, he spoke. "I need to go home." The words were simple. "Final?" "Yes," I said softly. "I do love you." "I know." A pause. "Goodbye, Emily." My throat closed around the response. "Goodbye, Daniel." The line went dead. I stood there under the open sky, phone still pressed to my ear long after the call ended. The city moved around me. Cars passing, distant laughter, the faint hum of ordinary life. Everything looked the same, but nothing was. I walked home slowly. The apartment felt unfamiliar when I stepped inside, like a stage after the play has ended. The air was still. The bed was neatly made now, stripped of evidence. I sat on the edge of it and let the silence settle. The night we chose Desire had felt like a beginning. It was, in a way, but not the kind we imagined. It was the beginning of endings. The beginning of seeing ourselves clearly. The beginning of understanding that love, when tangled in secrecy and longing, doesn't save you. It reveals you. I lay down and stared at the ceiling, where shadows once danced in soft rainlight. There was no storm tonight. No trembling halos of street lamps. Just quiet. And in that quiet, I let myself grieve. Not just him, but the version of myself who believed that wanting something deeply enough made it right. Desire had felt like fire. But in the end, it left behind only ash.